points that I made are applicable to reading in general and trying different genres, and classic is just that. It's just older books. Hello my loves, and thank you for joining me. It's Kirsten, and today I'm talking about how to get into classics. Now, if you've been on my channel for a little while, you would know that I started off barely reading any classics, and yet especially this year I have dove headfirst into classics. It's one of my favourite things. I like to have a classic every single month. I adore the writing. I love everything about it. However, classics can be very intimidating to get into, and there is a lot of gatekeeping around it, that you have to be smart or have an English degree to even understand them, or it's frustrating that that is the image that comes along with classics, but it's really not true. There are classics that are super easy to get into, and let's face it, they are books like our modern day books. These are just books that were just written a long time ago. So yes, some of the language is a bit different, but when you get used to that, it's fantastic, and it opens up this whole world of books where you can then realise where our stories have come from, what has inspired them, because let's face it, everything is inspired by something, and I love classics for that, to be able to read them and see how they have inspired generations after them. It's fantastic. But I have had a bit of a love-hate relationship with classics. I was not someone that in school I liked them. As I said, it's only really been the last year that I've really got into them. As much as I have said for absolutely years that Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte is my absolute favourite book, this was solely because of my English teacher that I had for my A-level when I was studying this text. She loved it, and she was a fantastic teacher. She had this way of just showing passion and love for this book and explaining it in a way that was accessible. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I do think if I had read this book on my own back then, which was 10 years ago, I would not have the level of love that I have for it now. And some of you may have loved classics from when you were a young child and absolutely adored it, or when you were in school and you were learning about it because you had a fantastic teacher that was able to ignite that passion. Or like myself, you could have gone through years of really not enjoying them until you find one book that you absolutely love, but then thinking it's just that one book and completely putting them off, until finally, as I'm older, to actually find that appreciation for them. So these are some of the tips and things that I have gone through to get myself reading more classics, and to the point where I love them and have to have one at least once a month for me to be happy. There are many steps into getting into classics. I have watched many YouTube videos on this. A lot of them do say to start off with full novels, and I just don't recommend that. As I said, if I had read Jane Eyre for myself, yeah, I wouldn't have liked this. I would have found it really boring. Unless because you're not like me and you could actually go, you know what, I'm going to push through this and really appreciate it. Go for it if that's what you want to do. However, if you were like me and just intimidated, wanting to read them but terrified of where to start, then these are a few of the tips that I have accumulated. These little black penguin classics, they're fantastic and amazing and so cheap. So these are £1 to £2. That's all they are, and you have two different types of these books. These three that I have are all excerpts from the larger text. So for example, we have The Fall of Icarus by Ovid, and that's an excerpt from Ovid's Metamorphoses. We have Circe and Cyclops by Homer, which is from the Odyssey. And then you have Circles of Hell by Dante from Dante's Inferno. Now all three of these are books that I would really like to read, but intimidated by them. Honestly, intimidated by the Odyssey, not quite as much since I've read the Iliad, but I was still a bit nervous. I mean, it's epic poetry. Poetry is not something I'm a massive fan of, but I really want to read the original Greek myth retelling text. Like, it's something I have a massive passion for. This was really helpful to get me interested in knowing what's going to happen at part of that book, but also knowing the writing style, what it's going to happen with. The same with Ovid's The Fall of Icarus. The Metamorphoses is something that I really want to read, and so reading a part of this gave me an insight into what I'm getting into, and it was fascinating. I haven't actually read Dante's Circle of Hell yet. I did try reading Dante's Inferno and I barely got into it. I want to give it another try. It's something that Dante's Inferno is referenced in culture so much, so I desperately want to read it, but I've decided I'm going to read this first, see how I get on with it, and then go from there. What I do is once I've read the larger text, I then donate these so that other people can find them and have enjoyment of them, and if you like these, then you know that you can go looking for the original text and read the full length story. So that's a great way if you know the specific book that you want to read, but you are intimidated by the size of it. Like I had another one by Leo Tolstoy, which was Apart from Anna Karenina. This is a really good way because obviously that's a massive ass book, and so this is a really good way to try those parts of a book. However, they do also do short stories, and this one is Matilda by Mary Shelley. I've read this and loved it. It's not something I've ever seen anywhere else, and this is a good way again to try out authors that you have an interest in but don't want to commit to one of their larger works. They do a lot of short stories. I highly recommend, if you're getting into classics, to try out an author's short story to see whether you like that. So highly recommend these Little Black Penguin classics. I hardly ever hear anyone talking about them. I think they're really underrated and a great way to see if you like classics, and you can, even if you don't know what author to start off with, but you've heard of different authors, this is a great way to literally go along and be like, okay, I'm going to try Jane Austen, or I'm going to try Oscar Wilde, and they have different authors for that you can literally just pick them up, collect them, read them, see what ones you like, and then when you've got the ones that you like, so say you get 5 and you find that 2 or 3 of them you really like, you can then know that that's where you can start, and this is such an inexpensive way of doing that. Another way of getting into classics is trying them in different formats. So you've got things like audiobooks. There are loads of audiobooks for different classics, and you've also got different film and TV adaptations. Now, unfortunately, I can't really recommend any audiobooks or film or TV adaptations. It's not something I listen to or watch. But talking about different formats, there are manga classics. Now, I know manga is not for everyone. However, if you are intimidated by classics because of all the descriptions and you are intimidated because of the language, I think these are a fantastic way of getting into it. Again, there are 2 different types. So you have the novel adaptations. So here I have Dracula and Jane Eyre. Both of these I have read the originals and then read the manga classics, and I would say they do a fantastic job of following that plot line for you but taking out all of that descriptive work for you. So it just cuts out all of that description and just shows you the core element of the plot, and you can use these as a way to see if you are interested in that storyline, and if you are, then you know that you can tackle that novel because you already know what happens. And I actually find that's really helpful with classics, is if you have a book that you're wanting to read but you can find an adaptation of it, it's really handy because then you know what to expect. And if you do get a slow part, because some books have some slow parts, like honestly, Jane Eyre, love it to pieces, but that first 100 pages, they're slow. Same as Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. That was a slow start. But knowing that you've tried it in a different format, such as a manga classic or a TV adaptation, gives you an understanding of what is going to happen, and so you can then follow alongside it. I do like it for this, but I would recommend, if you enjoyed it, do still read the book, because the actual book, you do get all of those extra descriptions. You get the atmosphere that goes alongside those books. Also, if you're trying to get into manga and like classics, vice versa. I always say that with these. I think they are fantastic, and again, something that I don't see many people talking about that I think are criminally undervalued. They are really good. Don't get me wrong, they are a bit more expensive because it is manga, and manga is more expensive because obviously you're paying for the artist as well. These are works of art as well as something to read. It's fantastic. However, as I did say, there were 2 types. The other type is Shakespeare. This, I think, is where these manga classics really shine. So I actually need to read this. I need to read Othello, but this has the full original text from William Shakespeare. So you have the full story of Othello in here, but you have the added imagery to go alongside it. And I will say Shakespeare is really hard for me personally, to understand without having seen it in some way. So obviously it's a play, it's meant to be watched, not read. However, this is a great compromise to that because you can read it and have the context with the images in there, but have every single thing that is in those, say the Penguin Black Classic editions, say you've got that edition, that full text of the actual play is in here. So you aren't missing anything. So I think these are fantastic. Are they good for studying from? I couldn't really say. There isn't any notes on the text or anything, but you do get that added imagery alongside it to really follow what is happening, which you just don't get with Shakespeare's plays. So I think this is fantastic if you can't watch the play or watch an adaptation of it, or you just want to have that extra context when you are reading it, but you don't want to have to compromise on missing things from the text. Looking for ones where it says on the back full original text is the way to go with that. I think if you're trying to get into Shakespeare, give this a try. I really have so much respect for these and love for these because I think it is a great way of just adapting classics into another format to help people get into them. And I really recommend, like, I like reading these if I want to read the classic like Jane Eyre or Dracula, like they're two of my absolute favourite classic books, but I don't want to sit there and commit to the whole story. These are what I go to because they are quick, easier reads. Like, in all honesty, yes, they seem really long, but it is pictures and you do just have the text of them talking to one another. So I read these in literally 2 hours. They don't take long at all, but you still get that full vibe of the classic. You still get that because you're still getting the speech and everything. So I would really look into these. If you don't want to buy them straight away, then see if your local store has any of these. I know Waterstone sometimes does. Just have a little look, have a flick through, see if it's something that you're going to like, and it is a good stepping stone for getting into manga and classics. But also they are doing lots of graphic novel adaptations. I know I've seen a graphic novel of A To Kill a Mockingbird, and again it just breaks down that text into the core speech of it all, the core plot, and puts it into a different format, and that makes it so much more accessible, especially to people that are worried about not getting on with the language of it. You then have those different formats to help you with that. So if you are interested in starting classics but are intimidated by the language, try a different format. Doesn't have to be manga classics, I just love talking about them. As said, there are graphic novel adaptations, you have audiobooks, you have films and TV shows. I think they're a great stepping stone for getting into classics so you can see what ones you're actually interested in, and once you've got that interest already, it makes reading the actual novels so much easier. So if piqued your interest, you're interested in getting into classics, but you're still not ready to commit to a big novel, don't blame you, I have you covered. I have a stack of short classics, which I'm not going to go through. I'm actually going to do a separate video on short classics you can read in a day. I think these are fantastic for getting into classics. Let me just do one as an example. So we have Camilla by Sheridan Le Fanu. You love Dracula, you love the films, things like that, you've never read the book and you want to, but you are intimidated by it. Why not try a short story first, which is Camilla? So Camilla is the vampire story that came before Dracula. I would argue is actually a lot more accessible, even though it was written earlier than Dracula. The writing style is so much more accessible. You get a full story and it is less than 150 pages long. This is something that you can easily read in a day, and it gives you that interest to see whether Gothic literature is for you. Highly recommend short story classics. There are so many by so many different authors, even ones like Frankenstein. That's actually a short story. The Picture of Dorian Gray, another short story. So there are loads of classics. Maybe look into the different classics that you want to read, and they might actually be shorter than what you think. As said, I will have a full video coming on that. Once it's uploaded, I will also have it linked in the description below, but this video is coming out first. Talking about short stories, you also have short story collections such as the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. There are 11 stories in this. Look how small it is, and it gives you another little taster into classics. See if you like the writing style, if you like the characters. It really gives you a good insight into that. Again, there are lots of short story collections to choose from, and what I love about short stories is it's literally such a low commitment. So some short stories will be couple of pages long. Some will be 10 or 15 pages long, and you can read it, a little snippet, and you're done for the day. It gives you time to think over it. What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? And then read in another one. And by the end of the book, you can see whether you actually like their writing style after all. So a lot of authors do actually have short story collections as well, if you don't want to go for a full short story. I recommend both, to be quite honest. I love a short story collection and reading them slowly over the course of a month, and I use these a lot to get into authors. For example, I have been desperate to get into Agatha Christie, so I started off with the short story collection of Miss Marple's 13 Problems, also known as the Tuesday Club Murders, and this is 13 short stories showcasing Miss Marple, who is one of Agatha Christie's main characters. But I am intimidated. I'm always a bit intimidated when I go into a new author, and the same with just normal books, to be fair, like modern day books, I mean. And so having a short story collection is a great way to do that. Now I know some people don't like short stories, and I was definitely one of them, but I would still say if you want to go into classics, then do maybe just give them a try. They are always worth a try. You can pick them up from your local library if you don't want to commit into buying a book, and just see what they're about. These are a great way to just dip your toes into an author's work, or as I said, if you really don't like short stories, they're not for you. You can always go for different short classics where they are a complete story, such as Animal Farm by George Orwell. This one is less than 100 pages long. It's a complete story. It's not going to be a massive commitment to get into. So that's something to really look out for, is authors' books that are actual short stories that are less than 200 pages, or a short story collection where each story, like this one, is only 15 pages long per story. They take about 20 minutes to read of an evening time for me to relax into. Short stories collections and then a short story in general are great ways to get into classics. It is something that I still do even with normal books. Let me show you actually. So reading a short story or just a shorter work by the same author is a way that I actually tackle my big book fear, or just when I'm wanting to read a book but intimidated by it, such as Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. I really wanted to read this book and I was absolutely intimidated by it because, I mean, it's huge. It's a brick. It is a massive brick. So the book I read first before getting into that one was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Yes, they are different storylines. However, it gave me an insight into her writing and I ended up loving it. I loved the style of her writing. So when I went into Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, I knew what I was getting in for, and so I wasn't as intimidated by it because I'd already read a shorter one of her books. And so this is something I recommend putting into classic books, or just books in general. If you have an author that you're really interested in but are intimidated by, see if they have a shorter book or a collection of short stories to try their work, and that way you know whether you like their writing style. And then of course the main one, which some you might be saying, why didn't you talk about this first? Because classics are not just classic books. They have different genres, just like all of our books. And depending on the genre that you like to read, normally you can then find a classic book in that genre to read. And the reason why I didn't start off with that one is because I wanted to highlight the different books that you can find to help you get into it. So you know your genre. So at this point, I wouldn't have thought I would need to tell you, look for a classic book in that genre. You know your genre. If you're interested in reading classics, you probably already have one or two classics that you're already interested in. So me highlighting those different ways that you can get into classics by reading the shorter stories, by trying a different format, highlighting the Little Black Penguin classic books, things like that. They're just some things that I don't see people talking about. But something that everyone talks about when getting into classics is finding your genre. Now, unless you're completely new to reading, you already have an idea of your genre that you like. And even if you are completely new to reading, you still have an idea of things that interest you. So it could be you like watching crime TV shows or films like Lord of the Rings and things, so you get an understanding of fantasy. I'm really bad at saying TV stuff. I don't know why I tried. But you will have those interests in your life that you can then put to books. So let's go through a few different genres that I have. Murder mysteries. I love cozy murder mysteries specifically. Think they're fantastic, and there are so many different classic murder mysteries. So you do have Agatha Christie and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who is the author of Sherlock Holmes. So those are like the two big greats. However, there are more. You have something like The Mystery of the Yellow Room by Gaston Leroux, which I'm hopefully going to be reading this month. I am filming this in September, so Hopefully by the time this comes out, I will have read this, or it is on the TBR to read for the month. But this is, again, a murder mystery. It's a standalone, it's all inside one book. It's a short one. Yeah, it's less than 250 pages. And this is a good way for you to try murder mysteries that you like. There are so many. I would actually say a murder mystery in general is a good way to get started in classics because they are fun, they're enjoyable, you have the suspense, the mystery, it makes you want to finish reading them because you want to know what happens. So I think in general, murder mysteries are a really good way to start. But say you're a romance reader, Jane Austen. Jane Austen is an amazing author. I would say do a bit of research into her books to see what book you really like, what tropes do you like, what book has those tropes in. I will link my Jane Austen video below where I give a brief summary of each of the books, what I liked about them. I also rank them, but Jane Austen is a good place to start if you like romance. But again, there are so many. I don't read a lot of romance, so I haven't read a lot of romance classics, but it is a good way, again, to try. So, I mean, everyone knows Jane Austen. Like a bit of sci-fi, you have H.P. Lovecraft. This is the Lovecraft Compendium. Again, short stories. You can look into more of his work, such as War of the Worlds, things like this, and that gives you an insight into sci-fi. I don't really like sci-fi. I have this because it's part of a classic collection, but I do recommend if you're trying a genre that you're not as sure on, again, all the things that I've already said, short stories, short story collections, trying it in a different format to see if you like it, all of that can be applied. So I think actually a lot of the points, the first few points that I made are applicable to reading in general and trying different genres, and classic is just that. It's just older books, and that's why I left this genre part till last. Obviously you have gothic literature, so you do have things like Dracula, things like that. So you can literally do a search of your favourite genre and then put classic books at the end of that, and you will find so many authors, so many books, and then you can look into it and then apply some of these other tips that I've already suggested to that search, and then that will help narrow it down to find a few different books which you can try to see if you like classics. So reason why I want to say that for last is because I think for me the context of all the other points that I've already said apply to this, into helping you find those classics and where to start with that. And the final thing that I'm going to say for today's video is if after all of that you're still nervous, still a bit intimidated, it's the writing style that has you more intimidated than anything else, you just think it's going to be too old, too inaccessible for you, then try modern classics. So they are still classic books, but they are more modern, normally written about like 1920s. And this is more accessible because it is more of a modern time, it is more modern language that's being used. You can generally find modern classics through Penguin by the fact that it does actually say on the spine modern classics. You also have vintage modern classics, like it will always be on there as modern classic, and again you can search for that as well. So that's a good way of trying if you want to get into classics but you're still, even with all these tips and stuff, still just intimidated by the writing style. You can work your way into it slowly with choosing a more modern classic. So I do have F. Scott Fitzgerald's Great Gatsby. This is one that I read in school. I do need to reread this one. It's a very popular one. It's what lots of people talk about when they speak modern classic. Generally Great Gatsby gets mentioned, and this one is a look into 1920s America, the glitz, the glam, there's parties and stuff going on. Or you have something like Shirley Jackson, The Haunting of Hill House, which is that haunted house trope. I know there's been TV adaptations and stuff, so if you like that more sinister, spooky book, again, it's placing everything that I've already said into the classic genre in general, but just applying it to the modern classics so that you can get used to the writing style slowly if you'd like to. There are also Little Penguin modern classics as well. Like the Penguin Little Black classics, they also do Penguin Little modern classics, and they are in this greenish colour on those, and again it does the same thing. So for example, I did read a short story collection by Shirley Jackson. It was a book like this, it had 4 short stories in it, and it gave me just an interest into Shirley Jackson's writing. I didn't keep it, I wish I did for this video, but again it was literally £1 and it gave me an insight into an author that I was interested in trying but just didn't know where to start. Her book, I mean, it was really weird. It was a really weird book, but it was really handy for that. So again, you can apply everything that I've said about these to modern classics if the writing style, the language of it still intimidates you. And then once you've tackled a few modern classics, you can then work your way backward if you would like to. And I think that concludes it for today. I think my main part throughout all of this was just give them a try. If you have an interest in a particular book or a particular author or a particular genre, then there are so many things that you can try to get into them, either by reading, say it's an author, one of their complete short stories or a short story collection. If it's a particular book, you can always have a look to see if there is a little excerpt version of that book for you to try to see if you think it's going to be for you. Just trying a different formatting of the book, exploring these options. There are so many, and classics are something that I do recommend. I know it's not for everyone, but it's definitely worth giving a try, especially if you want to see where the inspiration for things comes from. Highly recommend. But I hope this has helped. If there are any other things that you would like for me to answer specifically, do put those in the comments below and I will be responding to that. These are just some of the things that I personally do to help me in reading classics, and it's at the point now where, do I need these tips as much for myself? No. Do I still apply it sometimes? Yes, such as getting into Anne Radcliffe. I really want to read The Mysteries of Udolpho. It's massive, so I'm starting out with one of her smaller books first so I can try her writing style. But these are all things that really helped me get into reading classics more, and my collection went from 2 years ago being 5 classic books to over 90 now because I've enjoyed them so much. So hopefully this has helped you get into it, and if you do already read classics, let me know whether you agree with these. Do you have any other things that you think people could try to get into them? Please put that in the comments below. Let's start a discussion with all of this. But yeah, okay, I think I've spoken for long enough. I hope this all made sense, and if you have made it this far, then let's put a penguin emoji, because a lot of the books I was showing you are actually penguin editions, so let's put a penguin emoji below. And thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it that thumbs up, subscribe, comment to let me know that you're here. Social media links will be linked below, and I will of course catch you in the next one.